I'm Nora Bennett, 33 years old, and on the night everything tipped, I walked into a familiar restaurant and recognized the feeling you get when the air changes before a storm. People were smiling, but not at me. The red lanterns glowed along the walls, and at the end of the long table, my mother's pearls caught the light like a signal. My sister sat opposite an empty chair, my chair twirling a key fob between her fingers as if it were a prize she'd won instead of something she'd taken. My father watched the tablecloth like he could read the future in its stitching. I stayed standing, because there are moments when sitting feels like surrender, and this wasn't one of them. Before I go any further, tell me where you're listening from in the comments and tap like and subscribe if you've ever had to hold your ground when the people you love expected you to fold. I grew up in a one-bathroom bungalow where we handed down winter coats and shared casseroles stretched with elbow macaroni, and somewhere in that lean rhythm, my grandfather taught me to balance a checkbook with a pencil and patience. He believed in living within your means, paying what you owed, and writing thank you notes with your full name values that sounded old-fashioned when the world around us promised you could have anything with a swipe. My mother loved the appearance of plenty matching wreaths on the front windows, themed party napkins for every holiday, while my father learned to keep the peace by agreeing and quietly paying, even when the numbers didn't make sense. I chose a different way. I counted receipts, packed lunches, and stayed late at the office until the hum of the printer felt like a lullaby. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, and each small choice stacked into something solid. By the time I turned 33, the life I wanted had measurements, a down payment, saved dollar by dollar, a wedding venue, penciled in for spring, an old craftsman home with a porch, deep enough for 2 chairs and a lemon-yellow nursery someday. I worked as a senior forensic accountant. Ironic maybe for a woman who still used envelopes labeled groceries and utilities, but the discipline on paper matched the way my heart felt safest. Ethan, steady as a level line, never asked me to be anyone else. He met me in the middle, where long days ended with simple dinners and shared calendars, and it felt like the kind of quiet promise you build on. Still, there was a gap between the world we were making and the world I came from, a gap lined with jokes about me being the calculator and gentle nudges that turned into expectations. Could I cover a deposit? Could I float a bill? Could I help? Just this once. I told myself generosity was a good habit, and that family runs on grace, not ledgers, but grace can sour when it's never returned. And the evidence gathered slowly, little comments about how I was rigid, little celebrations I funded but didn't plan, little emergencies that arrived exactly on payday. My grandfather's passing left a quiet space in the family where his rules used to be, and in that space other voices got louder. My mother reminded me we share everything my uncle called money-only paper, and my sister learned how to smile while asking for what she hadn't earned. I kept saving anyway, watching the numbers rise like the water line on a river stone, and I told myself that steady work beats noise. That night at the Golden Lantern, the noise felt organized as if the table itself had rehearsed without me. Aunts whispered behind their cups, cousins held their phones at angles that could be innocent or not, and my mother wore her navy suit. She saved for moments she wanted to control. Kayla set the key fob down right where my plate should have been, its polished symbol catching every stray beam from the chandelier. The room smelled like orange peel and ginger, and under it all, I caught the faint scent of something burning in the kitchen, a reminder that even well-run places let something scorch now and then. I didn't know yet exactly what I would say, only that I would say it standing up. The first words out of my mouth were not the ones anyone expected, and the hush that followed felt like the music had cut without warning, leaving the clatter of the other tables too far away to matter. Across the room, the hostess lifted her head, and at the bar, a woman turned her phone slightly, like someone adjusting a mirror. My father's jaw tensed. My mother lifted her chin. Kayla's smile didn't move at all. I looked at the key fob, then at the faces I knew by heart, and chose the one question that would not let me go. The question hung in the air like a dropped glass, waiting to shatter. "Where's my money?" I said again, louder this time, and the clatter of plates from nearby tables slowed until even the waiter froze mid-pour. My mother's laugh came soft and rehearsed the one she used at charity luncheons when someone said something uncomfortable. "Sweetheart," she began, "that's exactly what we're here to talk about as a family." The word family had the weight of an ultimatum. I stayed standing. She gestured toward my empty chair, her smile brittle. "You've been working so hard. Sit down and let's be civilized." My eyes moved to the silver key fob glinting on the table in front of Kayla. "You already bought it," I said. She tilted her head, pretending innocence. "You mean the car I needed transportation for job interviews. Would you rather I show up in a clunker?" My mother nodded approvingly as if that settled it. "It's not like she spent it on nonsense, Nora. A good car is an investment." The words thudded in my chest. "That was my house fund," I said quietly. 8 years of saving." My father cleared his throat, still staring at the tablecloth. "You kept it in a joint account." He reminded me the kind of statement meant to sound logical instead of cruel. "An account your mother is on for emergencies." The word emergencies caught in my ears. My sister rolled her eyes. "It was an emergency, Dad. I couldn't keep borrowing rides from friends." Aunt Carol leaned in from halfway down the table. "She's right, Nora. You've got a good job. 6 figures, isn't it? You'll rebuild in no time." Around her, a few relatives nodded, their faces arranged in sympathetic concern that didn't reach their eyes. The room smelled of roast duck and orange peel, but underneath it all was that familiar mix of guilt and expectation. I glanced around the long table, uncles, cousins, aunts, each one waiting to see if I'd play my usual role and smooth things over. For years I had. I'd been the one covering checks when someone's wallet was forgotten wiring deposits for temporary loans that never came back. They called me the calculator behind my back, the responsible one who could fix anything with enough spreadsheets and patience. I told myself it was love. But looking across that table at my sister's smug smile and my mother's perfectly composed face, love felt like the wrong word. Kayla leaned forward, voice sugary and loud enough for the whole room. "You know what your problem is? You act like money's the only thing that matters. Maybe that's why you're still single at 33. She laughed softly, glancing around for approval. Someone, Uncle Dan, I think, let out a low chuckle. My hands felt cold even though the restaurant was warm. "I'm engaged," I said. "Ethan and I are putting a deposit on a house next month." "Then it's fine," my mother cut in quickly. "If he loves you, he'll understand that family comes first. We'll work it out." Her tone made it sound like we were discussing a minor scheduling conflict, not the theft of nearly everything I'd built. My phone buzzed in my purse, Ethan's name on the screen, but I couldn't answer yet, not with 20 pairs of eyes watching. A cousin muttered, "Money's meant to be spent," and another nodded in agreement. My father finally looked up, tired lines deepening around his eyes. "Nora, you make more than anyone at this table. We're not asking for a handout. It's just that your sister needed a start." The word needed scraped raw. I'd heard it for years. Dad needs help with the car repair. Mom needs new dental work. Kayla needs tuition money. Carol's roof needs fixing. Every request had come wrapped in that same soft demand, the one that made refusal feel like betrayal. My phone buzzed again. This time I answered, my voice tight. "Hey, Ethan." He sounded cheerful, unaware. "I'm at the venue. They need the deposit by Monday. Just checking you transferred it." My throat closed. Around the table, my mother's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Ethan!" I said, forcing my voice steady. "The fun's gone." Silence stretched long enough for me to hear the clinking of silverware from another table. "Gone," he repeated. "How, Nora? That's our house." My sister sighed loudly. "Oh, please, don't make a scene. It's not like you can't save again." My mother added quickly, "Tell him it was a misunderstanding." "We'll sort it out." Ethan's voice cracked through the speaker. A misunderstanding. That was our future, Nora. I ended the call before I could cry in front of them. The conversation around the table started up again, lower now, like a hive buzzing after being kicked. My father said something about perspective. My aunt mentioned forgiveness. Through it all, my sister tapped her manicure on the key fob, 3 slow beats that sounded like gloating. I stood there frozen between fury and disbelief, until my mother sighed and said, "You're embarrassing yourself. Sit down before people stare." People were already staring. A woman at the bar had her phone angled just enough to catch the light on her screen. I turned toward the doorway, but then my mother's voice stopped me. "If you walk out now, you'll regret it. You'll divide this family." I looked back at them, every single one complicit, every single one silent, and something inside me shifted clean and final. "My money isn't your emergency fund," I said. "It's not your insurance or your comfort or your prize. You have 24 hours to return it." My sister laughed, the sound sharp and careless. "Or what?" The question hung between us like a dare. I managed a small, even smile. "Or you'll find out what Grandpa really left me." The table went quiet. My mother's hand went to the pearls at her throat, her old nervous habit. My father started to speak, but stopped when she shook her head. I turned and walked toward the door, the restaurant noise rising behind me as if nothing had happened. Outside, the air was cool, the streetlights flickering against the damp sidewalk. My phone buzzed once more, a message from Ethan asking if I was okay, and another beneath it from a name I hadn't seen in 3 years, Martin Reeves, "Ready when you are." I stood there for a long moment, watching the text glow against the night, before sliding the phone back into my purse. Behind me, the laughter inside the restaurant grew faint, like something closing its own door. The next 24 hours would decide what kind of family we really were. I didn't sleep that night. The city outside my apartment felt louder than usual, horns echoing through the thin walls like reminders that life kept moving whether I was ready or not. My phone kept lighting up on the nightstand, missed calls from Ethan, a string of messages from Mom, and one short text from Kayla that read, "You'll get over it." Around midnight, I finally opened my laptop, scrolling through the familiar spreadsheets of my life budget's investments. Years of careful saving that had now been erased with one swipe of my sister's card. By 2 a.m, the house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I sat at the kitchen counter with a mug of cold coffee and stared at the text from Martin Reeves. "Ready when you are." He had been my grandfather's attorney for decades, a man who'd attended every family milestone, but rarely spoke more than a polite greeting. I typed out a short reply, "Tomorrow morning, please bring whatever he left for me." His response came almost instantly, 9 a.m. sharp. When dawn finally came, I took the train downtown. The ride felt endless, the rhythm of the tracks steady against the pulse in my chest. I arrived at Reeves and Hartwell Associates just before 9, the kind of law office where the reception desk gleamed and the clock ticked so quietly you could hear your own thoughts. Martin stood waiting near the door to his office. His gray suit pressed a leather folder tucked under one arm. "Miss Bennett," he said, extending a hand. "It's been a while." Inside the office smelled faintly of old paper and coffee. He gestured for me to sit. "Your grandfather asked me to reach out when you decided it was time," he said. His tone was steady, but I could tell he'd been expecting this day for years. He opened the folder and placed several sealed envelopes on the table between us. These were his final instructions. "I've held them since the week before he passed." I brushed my hand over the top envelope. "He told me once that I'd know when I needed them." Martin nodded. "He said that, yes. He also said you were the only one who ever paid him back when you borrowed." His voice softened. "He was proud of you, Nora." The weight of that sentence settled deep in my chest. I hadn't heard anyone say they were proud of me in years. Martin slid one document forward. "Your grandfather created a secondary trust 3 years ago. It was not part of the general estate handled by your mother." My head lifted. "A trust?" He nodded. "Yes. It holds property investments and several joint accounts. He named you the sole trustee." The words felt unreal. I thought my mother handled everything. He leaned back slightly. She handled what she knew existed. This, she did not. He explained the structure carefully, his voice measured. "The trust was built to protect what remained of your grandfather's wealth. He was concerned about how freely your parents and extended family used shared funds. He wanted someone responsible, someone who understood the difference between help and dependency." I sat in silence, listening as the foundation of my family history shifted. Martin handed me another envelope. "Inside, you'll find documents granting you full authority over the Bennett family accounts." The paperwork was updated after your grandfather witnessed several questionable withdrawals. I stared at the pages, my name printed beside words like trustee and executive authority. My grandfather had seen it all coming. The endless requests, the quiet manipulations, the excuses framed as emergencies. He told me once, Martin said, folding his hands on the desk, that people can confuse love with obligation. He didn't want that for you. I closed the folder, carefully steadying my voice. If I choose to act, what happens next? Then everything tied to these accounts becomes your responsibility, he said. Every withdrawal, every transfer, every decision. And if necessary, you have the right to freeze them entirely. I left the office an hour later, carrying the folder close against my chest. Outside, the wind had picked up scattering leaves across the sidewalk. I walked for several blocks before realizing I hadn't decided what to do next. The thought of confronting my family again filled me with a strange calm, like standing on the edge of a storm you finally understand. Back at my apartment, I set the folder on the table and opened my phone. Ethan had called 4 more times. I dialed him back and he answered on the first ring. "Nora," he said, relief and frustration tangled together. "Where have you been?" I told him everything about the restaurant, the stolen money, and the meeting with Martin. There was a long pause on the line. "So what now?" he asked. I looked at the folder. Now I said I make sure they never do this to me again. That evening I pulled out a notebook and began listing every transaction tied to my accounts. Years of small family favors added up in cold numbers across the page. There was the $3,000 for my father's car, $2,000 for Kayla's laptop, $5,000 for my mother's dental work. All repaid, she'd said, in love and loyalty. The total made my stomach turn. My grandfather had been right. Love without boundaries becomes debt. At 8 o'clock there was a knock at my door. I checked the peephole and saw them, my mother, father, and Kayla, standing in the hallway like an organized unit. Mom wore her red blazer, the one she used for confrontations. "We need to talk like adults," she called through the door. I opened it just enough to meet her eyes. "About returning my money?" I asked. "About ending this nonsense," she said, pushing past me before I could stop her. They filled my living room in seconds. My father sat heavily on the couch, scrolling through something on his tablet. Kayla lifted her phone, recording herself with a practiced smile. "So this is where my sister hides?" she said to the camera. "The one who thinks money means more than family." My voice stayed level. "Turn that off," she smirked. "Free speech." I pointed to the door. "Then speak freely outside." My mother ignored us both, turning to my father. "Show her the pictures," she said. He tapped the screen, revealing a slideshow of birthdays, graduations, and family vacations. "We've always been there for you," he said quietly. I folded my arms, and I paid for half of those trips. The silence that followed felt heavier than shouting. Finally, my mother said, "We'll set up a plan. Kayla will pay you back when she gets a job." I met her gaze. "When is that happening?" She hesitated. Kayla looked away. "That's what I thought." I reached for my phone. "Martin, it's Nora. I'm ready." My mother's hand flew to her pearls again, her tell. "Who's Martin Grandpa's attorney?" Kayla's recording stopped abruptly. "What attorney?" she asked. "The one he trusted," I said, walking to my desk and opening the folder. "The one holding the documents you all forgot existed." My father stood slowly, voice uneasy. "Your mother handled everything after he passed." I turned the first page toward them. "Did she tell you about the meeting he had 2 weeks before he died?" My mother's lips tightened. There was no meeting. "August 15th, I said in his hospital room, "witnessed and notarized." "You're bluffing," she said, but the shake in her voice betrayed her. I looked down at the papers in my hand. "Grandpa left me the authority to manage every family account. I can end this right now." I didn't raise my voice, but the words seemed to echo. My father sat back down, staring at his hands. Kayla crossed her arms but said nothing. 45 minutes, I said quietly, checking my watch. "If my money isn't returned by then, I freeze everything." My mother's composure cracked. "You can't do that. I already can." I opened my laptop, the login screen glowing like a warning. "And I will." When they left, the apartment fell silent again. I sank onto the couch, staring at the stack of documents that had just changed everything. My phone buzzed once more, a text from Martin. "Documents ready. Bringing witnesses." I set the phone down and looked toward the window, the city lights glinting against the glass. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the family's provider. I felt like the keeper of a truth they had chosen to ignore, and tomorrow morning they would finally see what my grandfather had left behind. Morning light spilled through the blinds as I waited in my living room, the folder open on the coffee table beside a fresh pot of coffee I didn't bother to pour. My phone buzzed twice before I answered. "We're 5 minutes away," Martin said. "Do you want us to come straight up?" I looked toward the door where I'd placed the spare keys my mother had once insisted on keeping. "They'll probably use their own way in," I said. He paused, then replied, "Understood. We'll follow your lead." 10 minutes later, the hallway camera on my phone showed exactly what I expected: my parents and Kayla standing in a tight line outside my door. My mother wore her red blazer again, the one she believed made her look authoritative. My father held his tablet under one arm, and Kayla balanced her phone upright, filming herself. I watched her lips move before the sound came through the door. "We're here at my sister's apartment," she was saying, trying to have a calm conversation like adults. My mother's fist hit the wood once, twice. "Open up, Nora. We need to talk." I unlocked the door but didn't step aside. "You're on camera too," I said evenly. "So choose your words carefully." My mother brushed past me without answering, claiming the couch like it belonged to her. My father followed silent but resigned, while Kayla scanned the room, still holding her phone high. "Nice place," she said, spinning slowly. "Paid for with whose money, I wonder." I looked straight at her. "Mine. And if you're recording, make sure you capture that part clearly." My mother gestured to my father. "Show her," she said. He powered up his tablet, flipping through a slideshow of family photos, birthdays, holidays, beach trips. "You're forgetting what matters," he said softly. "This family." The pictures shifted one after another, each image a memory they believed would undo me. "I remember those," I said, "and the receipts for most of them." My mother's tone sharpened. "Enough sarcasm." "This is ridiculous. Kayla made a mistake, and we're willing to fix it." She turned to her daughter. "Tell her, honey." Kayla lowered her phone reluctantly. "I'll pay you back," she said. "When I get a job." I folded my arms. "When will that be?" She looked away. Silence followed long enough for my mother to step in again. "She'll figure it out," she said. "We just need time." I picked up my phone and scrolled to Martin's number. "I've given you time," I said. "Now we do this my way." My mother's eyes darted to my hands. "Who are you calling Grandpa's attorney?" The name alone changed the air in the room. Kayla stopped recording, her phone dropping to her side. "What attorney?" she asked. "The one holding everything you thought didn't exist." My father stood, his voice uneven. "Your mother handled the estate. There's nothing left to discuss." I opened the folder on the coffee table, flipping to the first notarized page. "Did she tell you about the meeting he had 2 weeks before he passed?" My mother's hand went to her pearls. "There was no meeting." I met her eyes. August 15th, 3 years ago, in his hospital room. Witnessed, recorded, and signed. "You're bluffing," she said, but her voice trembled. "I'm not," I said quietly, "and you'll find out how serious this is in about 5 minutes." My father sank back onto the couch. Kayla crossed her arms. "What is all this, some dramatic show?" I didn't answer. Instead, I checked the clock. "You still have time to transfer the money back before it gets worse." My mother's calm cracked her tone, breaking into panic. "We can't, Nora. The car's already in her name. The dealer won't reverse it." "Then you'd better call them," I said. My father leaned forward. "Be reasonable. You're talking about freezing accounts, ruining your own family." "Funny," I said, "how family only matters when you need something." My mother stood, pointing toward the door. "This is going too far." I reached for my phone again. Not far enough. The knock came exactly on time, firm, deliberate. Martin entered with his briefcase, followed by 2 others, a paralegal and a notary. "Good morning, everyone," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "I believe this meeting concerns the Bennett Family Trust." The room fell silent. My mother's mouth opened, but no sound came out. My father stood again, unsteady. "Trust," he repeated. "What trust?" Martin placed his briefcase on the table and opened it with a soft click. "Walter Bennett established a revocable trust 3 years before his passing. It was kept separate from the primary estate. Mrs. Bennett, you received what he intended you to receive. The remainder real estate holdings, investment portfolios, and all associated family accounts was secured here. He handed me a document with my name printed at the top, sole trustee. My mother's face went pale. "That's impossible," she said. "He would have told us." "He did tell someone," Martin replied, nodding toward me. "Your daughter." He began removing other documents, each neatly labeled property titles, account statements, legal correspondence. Mr. Bennett was aware of ongoing financial misuse within the family, he said evenly. This structure was designed to prevent further damage. Kayla's voice rose. "So you're saying she controls everything now? I'm not saying it," Martin answered. "Your grandfather did." He handed her a copy of the trust summary. The trustee has full discretionary power, including the right to freeze or release funds, suspend credit accounts, and reassign property titles. My father looked at me, his expression somewhere between disbelief and fear. "You wouldn't actually—" I clicked the touchpad on my laptop, bringing up the first account. "Watch me." One by one, I entered the commands. "Family checking," I said, typing steadily. "Frozen. Investment portfolio frozen. Emergency fund frozen. Credit line suspended." My mother's voice broke. "Stop! You can't do this!" Martin's tone stayed calm. "She can. And it's entirely within the law." Kayla grabbed her phone, fumbling to open her banking app. "It says access denied." "That's a glitch, right?" I shook my head. "No glitch. Grandpa planned it this way. You could deposit money, but you never owned the accounts." My mother's hand shook as she checked her own screen. "My cards just declined," she whispered. My father tried his with the same result. Martin closed his briefcase. "The assets are now under the trustee's management. Any future use requires her approval." My mother's voice rose to a near shout. "You're making us beg. From our own daughter, from your trustee." He corrected gently. "It's not personal. It's financial stewardship." The room stayed silent long enough for the notary to finish signing the acknowledgement forms. My sister was the first to speak. "What about the house?" she asked, her voice small now. Martin adjusted his glasses. "The family residence is held in the trust as well. Mrs. Bennett and Mr. Bennett are listed as tenants at will." My mother's hands dropped to her sides. "Tenants," she whispered. That means it's legally Nora's home," Martin said. Kayla sank into a chair, staring at her phone. "This can't be real," she murmured. I closed my laptop softly. "It's real, and it's fair." My father's voice cracked. "What happens now?" I looked at him, at both of them. "Now," I said, "you learn how to live without taking what isn't yours." When they finally left, the apartment felt larger somehow, like the air had been cleared of years of noise. Martin gathered the signed documents into his case. "He trusted you for a reason," he said quietly. I nodded, not trusting my voice. After they were gone, I stood at the window watching the street below. The sun had dropped low enough to cast long shadows over the buildings. I could see my parents and sister outside, their figures small against the light, as they walked to the car, moving without speaking. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the one left behind. Tomorrow would bring their reactions, the phone calls, the accusations. But that night, the only sound in my apartment was the quiet click of the clock on the wall, and somewhere beneath it, the echo of my grandfather's voice reminding me that strength and kindness are not the same thing, and that sometimes protecting yourself is the kindest act of all. By the next morning, the story had already left my living room. Someone, maybe Kayla, had filmed parts of the confrontation and posted them online before Martin even left the parking lot. I woke to notifications pinging across my phone, strangers sharing clips with captions that made me out to be the villain or the hero, depending on which comment thread you read. The video was only 30 seconds long, just enough to show my mother's tearful face and my voice saying, "Funny how family only matters when you need something." By noon, Kayla's version of events was trending among her friends. "My sister froze our family's accounts," she'd written, "and she's making us homeless." The comments were harsh, but not in the way she expected. People began asking why a 27-year-old had access to her sister's money, why she was driving a car she didn't pay for. By late afternoon, screenshots of her posts filled my inbox, sent by coworkers and even a few clients. I muted every app, set my phone face down, and focused on the email from Martin instead. He'd written, "The trust documents are secure. They cannot challenge them successfully. We should meet at the office tomorrow at 10 for formal review." Beneath that, he'd added a postscript. "Your grandfather's decision was meant to protect you, not punish them. Don't let their noise drown out that truth." I stared at those words longer than I meant to. That night I called Ethan. "You saw it?" I asked. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It's everywhere, Nora." His voice held no anger, just exhaustion. "People will forget," I said. "They always do." Maybe he replied, "But you shouldn't have to explain yourself to strangers for doing the right thing." Saturday morning came gray and cool. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when the knock came again, 3 quick raps followed by my mother's voice. "We need to talk." I glanced at the security feed on my phone. She wasn't alone. My father stood behind her, pale and uneasy, and Kayla leaned against the wall, arms folded, sunglasses hiding her eyes. They looked tired or maybe just cornered. I opened the door but stayed in the frame. "You have 5 minutes," I said. "Then I have a meeting." My mother pushed past me as if we were starting a routine argument. "This has gone too far," she began. "Your father's medication wasn't approved at the pharmacy. We can't even buy groceries." I crossed my arms. "That's what happens when you drain accounts that aren't yours." Kayla stepped forward. "We didn't drain anything. I used what was available." "For a luxury car," I said, "not a necessity." She shifted her tone, defensive. "You don't understand. My image matters for work." I stared at her. "What work?" My father finally spoke, voice low and careful. "Nora, please. You've made your point. Your grandfather's money is yours to manage, but punishing us won't solve anything." I picked up the folder from my coffee table and held it out. "This isn't punishment," I said. "It's accountability. There's a difference." The sound of keys turning in the lock interrupted us. Martin entered right on time, briefcase in hand, followed by his paralegal and a notary. My mother's posture stiffened instantly. "We didn't agree to this," she said. "You did?" Martin replied calmly, setting his case down. "Yesterday by text message. You asked to resolve this as a family. That's what we're doing." The next hour unfolded like a slow trial. Martin explained each document carefully, ensuring they understood what the trust allowed and what it restricted. He read Walter's letter aloud, his steady voice filling the room. "This trust exists not to divide my family, but to protect its future. Responsibility must be earned, not assumed." My mother's eyes glistened, but she said nothing. Martin continued listing the assets and terms, the clauses for repayment, the boundaries for withdrawal. "As of this moment," he said, "Mrs. Bennett and Mr. Bennett will receive a fixed monthly stipend for essentials. All credit lines and shared cards remain suspended until compliance is confirmed." My father exhaled heavily. "You're treating us like children," he muttered. "No," Martin said gently, "like beneficiaries who mismanaged resources. There's a distinction." Kayla's face turned red. "And what about me?" she demanded. "You stole $127,000, Martin replied evenly. "That constitutes fraud." Her eyes widened. "You can't charge your own sister." "She hasn't," he said, glancing at me. "Yet. There's a clause allowing clemency if you return the vehicle voluntarily and obtain employment within 30 days. My mother gasped. "A job? You can't expect her to work retail or something." I met her gaze. "That's exactly what I expect." Kayla's jaw tightened. "You'd humiliate me," I answered quietly. "You did that yourself." The notary recorded every word as signatures were placed on the forms. When it was done, Martin closed his briefcase. "You've all been served copies. The trust's terms begin immediately." My mother stood abruptly. "This is insane," she said. "We raised you. We gave you everything. And I gave it back," I said. "More times than you'll ever count." They left without another word, the sound of the door closing behind them echoing through the apartment. Martin lingered a moment longer. "It will be loud for a while," he said, "but noise fades. Stability doesn't." I nodded. "Thank you, Martin." He offered a small smile. "Your grandfather would have been proud." That afternoon, I received a call from my boss, David Marks. "Harper," he began. He always mixed up my name with the analyst down the hall.
I saw some chatter online about your family situation. I braced myself, but his tone was calm. If you need our legal department's help, it's available. Otherwise, good work handling a personal crisis with precision. I blinked, surprised. You're not concerned. You're a forensic accountant, he said. You don't just solve problems, you prevent them. I'd call this proof of concept. When the call ended, I sat back and looked at the still open folder. The financial landscape of my entire family was now in my hands. Every dollar they spent would pass through my approval. Every misuse would stop at my desk. The power of it was sharp and sobering, not something to celebrate, but something to wield carefully. By evening, the messages started again. My mother's tearful voicemails, Kayla's angry ones, relatives demanding explanations. I let them all go to voicemail. Instead, I typed one email to Martin Free's all remaining accounts linked to the joint family fund. Effective immediately. His reply came a minute later. Done. For the first time in 8 years, my accounts were quiet. No unexpected withdrawals. No late-night transfers labeled emergency. Just clean, untouched numbers. I shut my laptop and sat in the quiet. Through the window, the city glowed against the night sky, a steady hum that reminded me of who I'd become, someone who no longer needed permission to protect herself. Tomorrow, there would be fallout, Kayla's public reaction, my parents' panic, the whispers from relatives who'd once praised my generosity. But tonight, I could breathe. My grandfather's plan had worked, and for the first time, the math of my life finally balanced. By Monday morning, the silence from my family had turned into noise I couldn't escape. My work email filled with alerts from financial institutions confirming changes to the accounts. Every freeze, every reallocation processed exactly as instructed. My mother called 17 times in less than a day. Kayla's messages swung between fury and pleading. The only one who hadn't reached out was my father, which somehow hurt the most. When Martin called, I was at my desk running quarterly reconciliations that suddenly felt trivial compared to everything unraveling outside the office walls. We have an issue, he said. Your sister started a GoFundMe page last night. She's framing it as family eviction by greed. It's gaining traction. I opened the link he sent. There it was, Kayla sitting in her car, tears glistening under perfect lighting, claiming she was the victim of a controlling sister. Her words were careful, nothing outright false, but twisted enough to sting. The comments came fast. At first sympathetic, then skeptical. Someone had dug up her social media posts from last week, pictures of the Mercedes, the caption about being blessed. The tone of the responses shifted. People began piecing the story together. By noon, the fundraiser had been flagged and removed. I closed the tab without satisfaction. Damage control never felt good, even when it worked. That afternoon, Ethan stopped by my office. He leaned against the doorframe, tie-loosened expression, serious. Your mom called me, he said. She said you're out of control. I looked up from my desk. Did you believe her? No, he said simply. But she's scared. They all are. I gestured toward the paperwork stacked between us. They should be. He crossed the room and took my hand. Nora, you've done everything right. You're protecting what's yours. Just don't lose yourself in proving a point. His words landed softer than I expected. I nodded, unsure whether to thank him or argue. The next day, Martin scheduled a formal review at his downtown office. When I arrived, the conference room was already set up, neat rows of folders, a court reporter at the corner desk, and 2 witnesses from his firm. My parents arrived together, followed closely by Kayla, her sunglasses hiding eyes that were red from crying or lack of sleep. Aunt Carol and Uncle Dan came too uninvited, but eager to support family. Martin greeted everyone with the kind of calm that fills a room without asking permission. We're here to formalize the Bennett family trust terms, he said, and to ensure all parties understand their roles. He motioned for the court reporter to begin. The rhythmic clicking of keys filled the silence. He began by summarizing the trust's structure. All prior estate documents are void. The assets, properties, portfolios, and joint accounts fall solely under the trustee's discretion. My mother interrupted, voice trembling. You mean my daughter's control? Martin didn't look up. Legally, yes. Mr. Walter Bennett appointed her trustee due to her financial record and demonstrated integrity. Kayla shifted in her seat. He didn't know what he was doing. He was sick. Martin slid a notarized affidavit across the table.
Dr. Chen, his attending physician, confirmed his full mental capacity at the time of signing. Kayla went quiet. He continued reading from Walter's letter of intent. In 8 years, Nora never asked for money, only borrowed once for education, and repaid it with interest. Meanwhile, other family members made unrecorded withdrawals exceeding $200,000, including purchases listed as personal indulgences and cosmetic expenses. My mother's breath caught. "That's private." "Not anymore," Martin said calmly. "The trust requires full transparency." He moved to the next section. Each family member will receive a fixed living allowance. Additional funds may be distributed only upon meeting specific conditions: employment verification, financial literacy completion, and repayment schedules for prior debts. Uncle Dan muttered, "This is ridiculous." Aunt Carol shushed him, though her own face was tight. I stayed silent, letting Martin's words carry the weight they deserved. Kayla slammed her hand on the table. "You can't do this. You're ruining my life. You ruined your credit first," I said quietly. She turned to our mother. "Say something." Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "Your sister's gone too far." Martin adjusted his glasses. "Mrs. Bennett, your daughter is acting within her legal authority. If she wanted to, she could revoke access entirely. Instead, she's offering structure." My father finally spoke, voice thin but steady. "What kind of structure?" Martin handed over a final document. "A clemency clause." "Yes." Kayla Bennett returns the vehicle, voluntarily secures employment within 30 days, and maintains it for 6 months. Criminal charges will not be filed. Upon completion, she may receive a bonus grant for a modest car. Kayla's expression shifted from rage to disbelief. "You'd send me to jail." I met her eyes. "No, Kayla. You'd send yourself." She stared down at the paper, then grabbed the pen with shaking hands and signed. My mother stood abruptly, eyes glistening. "Enough. We're family. This legal performance isn't who we are." I looked at her evenly. "Maybe it's time we decide who we are." The court reporter's typing paused. The silence that followed felt heavier than the law itself. When the meeting ended, Martin stayed behind with me while the others filed out. He handed me a sealed envelope. "Your grandfather left this for you," he said. The handwriting across the front was faint but unmistakable. I waited until the door closed before opening it. The letter was short, written in Walter's deliberate penmanship. "Nora, they'll call you cold and cruel, but you're neither. You're the guardian I chose because you understand that love without boundaries becomes exploitation. Make them earn it. Make them grow. That's the real gift." I folded the letter carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. Outside the glass walls of the conference room, I could see my family huddled in the lobby, Kayla wiping her eyes, my mother whispering to anyone who'd listen. My father stood apart watching me with something that almost looked like relief. When I stepped out, he stopped me near the door. "You really did all this for their own good, didn't you?" His voice was quiet. "I did it for all of us," I said. "Even you." He nodded once, then joined my mother without another word. I turned to Martin, who waited by the elevator. "Now what?" I asked. "Now," he said, "you see who grows and who resists." By the time I reached the parking garage, the weight of the day finally caught up with me. I sat behind the wheel letter still in my lap and took a long breath. Outside, my phone buzzed again, another message from Kayla unread. I didn't open it. The sound of footsteps echoed through the concrete. Ethan appeared beside the car, holding 2 coffees. "Thought you'd need this," he said, handing me one through the window. "How did it go?" I looked down at the cup steam curling into the cool air. "The truth came out," I said softly. "All of it." He opened the passenger door and slid in. "Then it's finally starting." I nodded, watching the city lights flicker ahead of us as we pulled into traffic. The legal part was over, but the real change, the kind my grandfather had hoped for, was only beginning. The days following the trust meeting unfolded with the quiet precision of a plan settling into place. The financial accounts, once tangled and chaotic, were now organized under a single dashboard on my laptop. I could see every transaction, what came in, what went out, and how much remained. For the first time in years, nothing disappeared overnight. But peace didn't come with the numbers. It arrived in slow, careful moments. A week after the meeting, Kayla sent me a single-line email. "Returning the car. Dealership scheduled pickup for Friday. No greeting, no signature, just that. 2 hours later, the dealership confirmed the return and forwarded proof of transfer. It was the first responsible act she'd taken in years. My parents, on the other hand, stayed silent. The house payments now came from a designated maintenance fund released monthly through the trust. They could live comfortably, but not extravagantly. My mother called it humiliation. My father called it structure. Their voices no longer came to me directly. Everything filtered through Martin's office. Ethan kept me steady through the noise. Some nights we sat on my apartment balcony with takeout containers and no words, just the sound of the city below us. "It'll settle," he said one evening, watching the streetlights flicker on. "People adjust faster than they admit." I nodded, not sure if he meant my family or me. By the end of the month, the silence began to shift. My mother's charity friends stopped tagging her in their event photos. Aunt Carol's texts to me turned from snide to polite. And Kayla, who had once filled every social media feed with travel selfies, started posting about new beginnings and learning from failure. It was strange seeing the transformation written in captions like she was narrating her own repair. Then came the letter from Martin. Inside was a formal notice for the Trust's first quarterly review scheduled in 2 weeks. It was routine, but I knew what it meant we'd all be in the same room again. This time, not as opponents, but as participants in the system we'd built. When the day came, I arrived early. Martin's conference room felt less intimidating this time, though the memories of raised voices still lingered in the air. Ethan joined me for moral support, though he stayed quiet beside me. My parents arrived together, dressed neatly but subdued. My mother avoided my eyes, and my father gave a small nod, something between a greeting and an apology. Kayla came last. Her hair was tied back her phone, nowhere in sight. She wore a plain gray blouse, simple, almost modest, and held a folder of papers in her hands. Martin began, as he always did, steady and calm. "This is the first review under the Trust's operational plan," he said. "We'll verify compliance review expenditures and confirm progress reports." He looked to Kayla. "You were given 30 days to secure employment. How did that go?" She handed him the folder. "I started 3 weeks ago," she said, voice quiet but clear. "Full-time at Lakeview Auto Group, reception and client scheduling." Martin opened the folder, scanned the pay stubs, and nodded. "Congratulations. That fulfills your employment requirement." I watched my mother's expression shift, relief, pride, and something else, maybe shame. My father smiled faintly, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes but means something anyway. Kayla looked straight ahead, avoiding us both. Martin continued, "As per the clemency clause upon 6 months of verified employment, you'll be eligible for the matched savings grant. Keep consistent records." Kayla nodded. "I will." The meeting moved on to my parents' accounts. The reports showed every expense: mortgage payments, utilities, groceries, nothing extravagant. "You've remained within the limits," Martin said. My mother exhaled audibly as though she'd been holding her breath for weeks. My father thanked him quietly. When the review ended, Martin stacked the files neatly and said, "You've all made progress. Mr. Bennett would have been pleased." The room stayed silent for a beat too long before my mother finally spoke. "He always did favor her," she said, looking at me. But maybe he was right to. It wasn't a surrender, not fully, but it was something. Afterward, Kayla lingered in the hallway while my parents left. She looked younger than she had in months. "I got an apartment," she said almost shyly. "Just a studio near the dealership. I'll be fine." I nodded. "That's good, Kayla." She hesitated before adding, "The car. It's weird not having it. But walking to work isn't so bad." Her small smile caught me off guard. "You're doing the right things," I said. "Keep going." When she left, I stood there for a while, the hallway quiet except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. For the first time in a long time, the word family didn't feel like a burden. It felt like a structure, something imperfect, but maybe still repairable. That evening, I met Ethan at our favorite coffee shop downtown. He was already at the table, 2 cups in front of him. So he asked, "How'd it go?" I told him everything, the job, the apartment, even my mother's small admission. He smiled. "That's progress." We walked along the river afterward, the city lights reflecting on the water. You know, Ethan said, you handled this the way your grandfather would have. Not just with rules, but with grace. I didn't answer, just watched the reflections ripple. The following week, an article appeared online from a local business magazine, Forensic Accountant Balances Family and Fortune. It was short, but thoughtful, painting a picture of integrity and control. My company reposted it on their website, and within a day, I received an offer for a speaking engagement at a financial ethics conference. My name, once buried behind numbers, was finally standing on its own. When I called Martin to thank him for his recommendation, he said, "You've done the hard part. The rest is just maintenance." His tone carried quiet pride, the kind my grandfather once had. By the end of the month, the changes were visible. My parents had started cooking at home instead of dining out. My mother's voice, once sharp with control, softened when she spoke to me over the phone. And Kayla, true to her word, kept working. She sent me a photo one Friday evening of her new car, an older Honda Civic, captioned simply, "Paid for in full." I stared at that message for a long time before replying, "I'm proud of you." The next morning, I printed my grandfather's letter and framed it beside my desk. It felt right, like a compass pointing back to the start of everything. The weight of the past months didn't vanish, but it finally felt like it belonged behind me. That night, as Ethan and I sat on the couch planning our new house search, my phone buzzed again, this time with a message from my father. "Your mother made your favorite pot roast tonight. Sunday at 6 if you're free." I read it twice before setting the phone down. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I leaned back, listening to the quiet hum of the city, the same rhythm that once kept me awake. Maybe I'd go, maybe not. But for the first time, the choice felt entirely mine. And somewhere I hoped my grandfather would have smiled at that. The Sunday invitation stayed on my phone all week. Every time it buzzed, I thought about replying, but the words never came. It wasn't anger holding me back anymore, just hesitation. I'd spent years being the person who fixed everything, who showed up no matter what. This time I wanted to show up because I chose to, not because I was expected to. That weekend, Ethan and I signed the papers for our new home, a small craftsman on the edge of the city with a wraparound porch and maple trees that would turn gold in the fall. It wasn't extravagant, just peaceful. After the signing, we stopped for coffee, and I looked at him over the table. "Do you think people really change?" I asked. He smiled. "If they're given the chance and the boundaries to try, yeah, I think they do." On Sunday evening, I drove to my parents' house. The porch light glowed like it always had, but the air felt different, quieter somehow. My father opened the door, his face soft with surprise and relief. "You came," he said. I nodded. I did. My mother was in the kitchen, her hands dusted with flour, the smell of pot roast filling the room. For a moment, the sight of her like that, the way she looked up, startled, but hopeful, took me back to simpler times. We ate together, not perfectly, but peacefully. The conversation stayed cautious, circling safe topics like the garden, the weather, and my upcoming conference talk. My mother asked about Ethan, and I told her he was well. Then she reached across the table and said quietly, "I know I made things harder than they had to be. I see that now." Her hand trembled slightly, and for once she didn't hide it behind her pride. I didn't rush to forgive or to fill the silence that followed. Some moments don't need to be fixed, they just need to exist. My father finally spoke. "We're proud of you, Nora," he said, eyes steady on mine. "Your grandfather would be too." I looked at him, then at her, and something in my chest eased. Maybe that was enough for tonight. Before leaving, I stopped in the living room. The photo of my grandfather still sat on the mantel, his calm eyes meeting mine. I touched the frame gently. "You were right," I whispered. "They're learning." Back home, the house felt warm and waiting. Ethan was on the couch, papers spread out for his work. He looked up when I came in. "How was it?" he asked. I hung my coat, thinking about the dinner, the small shift in my mother's voice, the relief in my father's eyes. It felt calmer, I said, like the start of something better. Later that night, I sat by the window, watching the city lights shimmer against the dark. My laptop screen glowed softly, an email draft opened to Kayla. She had sent another update earlier, steady work hours, her first savings deposit, a photo of the small Honda she'd bought herself. I typed back, You're doing well. Keep going. For a long time, I just sat there listening to the hum of traffic below the quiet rhythm of a life no longer ruled by chaos. Every decision I'd made, the confrontation, the boundaries the trust had carried a cost. But in the quiet, I could finally feel what my grandfather meant when he wrote that strength and kindness aren't opposites.
They're two parts of the same truth, that love without boundaries becomes loss, and discipline without compassion becomes cold. When I turned off the light, the framed letter on my desk caught the last bit of glow from the street lamp. His words were there to stay proof that legacy isn't about inheritance or wealth. It's about courage, honesty, and knowing when to stop handing out pieces of yourself to people who refuse to grow. In the end, the numbers balanced, but the real work was never about money. It was about respect, mine, theirs, and the kind that only takes root when you stop giving away what should have been protected all along. So now when people ask how I managed to rebuild peace from all that noise, I tell them it wasn't luck or revenge. It was discipline wrapped in love and a promise to never mistake silence for forgiveness again. If you've ever had to draw a hard line to protect your own peace, I hope you know it doesn't make you cruel. It means you've learned to value what you worked for. And if this story found you tonight, take a moment to breathe, to think about what's worth keeping and what you're finally ready to let go. Thanks for listening. And if my story reminded you of your own, share it with someone who might need that reminder too. Sometimes justice doesn't sound like victory, it sounds like peace.